Brokers for Clean Power. We are a fiscally sponsored project of Council Mountain Keeper, Inc. We focus on building decarbonization, transportation decarbonization, and the power sector across New York State. Those are the top 3 greenhouse gas emitters across New York State. So that is our work, and most recently, we've been doing a lot of work in the Hudson Valley, where we kind of have a home base and a few of our staff members work to support BESS and educate people about BESS across New York. And really, what is BESS? What does it mean for your community? So we've had a few of these. This is the New Paltz one. So battery energy storage in New Paltz and neighboring communities. I'm also going to be kicking it over to Joe Londa from the New Paltz Climate Smart Commission for one of the slides later on to give a little context on what's being done here in New Paltz. So we're going to go to the next slide here. So I'm going to introduce Jeffery Seidman and then Dan Murray, and then I'll do some trivia. We have some door prizes, kind of an incentive to get people to show up here today. We have a raffle. I hope you all kept your tickets. And then we'll have a Q&A panel to ask as many questions as you want. We have specialists here that traveled far to answer your questions. Just some house rules though. Please wait until the end of the panel discussion. So all 3 of the speakers have gone to then, they're going to sit up there and you can ask your questions. Write them down on your phone if you can't remember. And please be respectful for everyone's time. The last one of these we had a lot of people giving comments but not really asking questions to the experts. So we want to make sure that they can answer your questions. And if you've already asked one question, let's just try to give a turn to everybody in the room. Okay. So I'm going to introduce Jeff Seidman. He's a professor at Vassar College and completed his graduate education at Oxford University. Receiving a doctorate of philosophy, he taught philosophy at London School of Economics. He currently teaches courses on ethics and environmental studies at Vassar College, including a course called Finding Your Place in the Climate Fight. He has created public-facing resources on climate solutions and careers and is an active advocate for clean energy infrastructure in the Hudson Valley. Last year, he led a successful effort to overturn a moratoria against BESS in the town of Poughkeepsie. So let's welcome Jeff up.
Thank you guys so much for having me. So I'm Jeff Seidman, and Melissa sort of pointed to the reason I'm here, which is winding around, which is a couple of years ago, the town of Poughkeepsie faced questions like you're facing now. A battery developer proposed a large development about a mile from my house in the town of Poughkeepsie. And town board members and community members Googled BESS, or lithium-ion batteries. And they were met with, as you'll be met with if you do this, alarming pictures of fires and scary articles that name the toxic chemicals that is in the smoke of those fires if they burn. And so people were entirely understandably, in my view, entirely reasonably alarmed and concerned. And people care about the welfare of their families and the health and safety of their community. And so they said, wow, we don't want this here. Like, why is it worth it to us to take a risk like this into our community? And so they pressed the town board, and actually members of the town board, I shouldn't say pressed, but the town board decided to impose a moratorium saying there will be no battery storage systems, grid-scale batteries, in the town of Poughkeepsie. And I learned of this just as the moratorium was about to go into place. And although my background is in philosophy, as Melissa said, I've been for a number of years teaching courses on the energy system generally. And so I have some understanding of, on the one hand, the roles that batteries play in the larger energy system, and the grid in particular. And second of all, I've read enough and have enough understanding that I knew, or at least let me put it this way, I had the opinion, it's still my opinion, that the impression that people reasonably enough get from reading those very scary news articles and Facebook posts, etc., is sort of out of all proportion. Batteries, the risk of, I'm giving you an opinion now, and I'm not going to argue for this opinion, but it was my opinion that the risk of these things is far less than the risk of many technologies that we live with really, really comfortably day after day after day. But because they're new and the news stories are sensational, that is not people's perception of the risk, understandably enough. So over a period of 18 months, I joined together with some others to do my best to share what I know with the town board in Poughkeepsie and with the community in Poughkeepsie. And at the end of 18 months, we got to the point that the town board felt comfortable enough to reverse itself, to end the moratorium, and to pass a positive zoning law that enables grid-scale battery storage systems in the town of Poughkeepsie. So what I'm going to give to you today is I'm going to share with you what I shared with my own town. So that's how I'm here. So the way I'm going to frame this is, the question I'm going to ask is like, why are we talking about this all of a sudden? You may have noticed that just in the last few years, all of a sudden, battery proposals are popping up all over the place. In Ulster County, there's in the town of Ulster, and in Saugerties, and I believe maybe in Gardner, I'm not sure, no, not Gardner, New Paltz, and I don't know where else. And so, what's up with that? Why is this happening all of a sudden? So, I want to start, there we go, by narrowing what we're talking about a little bit. So, battery energy storage systems, or what I'm just going to call grid-scale batteries, they're what you see on the right there. They are lithium-ion or lithium iron phosphate batteries in large containers that look like shipping containers. I've shown them next to smaller residential and commercial scale batteries. They can be co-located with, for instance, a solar farm, so that the solar farm can create power during the day, charge up the batteries, and then those batteries can then feed that power or continue to feed that power into the grid after the sun goes down. That's really, really valuable and important, but that's not the use case that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the case where these are just standing on their own next to almost always an electrical substation, next to a high voltage transmission line. And that's what you have there. So as I said, I showed them next to smaller residential and commercial scale batteries, like you might use to back up a home or a business. The important thing to know is these are all the same thing. These are the very same battery cells that are just packed together, assembled together into smaller or bigger or very big assemblages. So you might know that residential scale home backup, for instance, has been around for quite a while now. And so the question, why grid batteries, is really, why are we all of a sudden seeing the ones on the right? The really big ones where you have enough batteries assembled together that they can play a role in supporting the whole electrical grid, as opposed to just a single home or business. So why is that happening now? So, start with cost. A decade ago, batteries, systems like this cost something like over $700 per kilowatt hour of storage. Now it's something like $118, and the price is falling every year. The reason I'm showing this is partly, it's not just why this is happening, but it's important to understand why the cost is falling and why it will continue to fall, probably expected for decades more to come. The reason is that battery cells, the fundamental units of these things, are like computer chips. We make them in factories over and over and over and over again. And as with computer chips, the more we make of them, the better we get at making them. So every single year, the underlying technology, but also the systems engineering wrapped around it, but also the manufacturing processes by which we make them gets better, more precise, cheaper, but also safer. And there's a way in which you kind of already know this, because these batteries are the same lithium-ion batteries that we all carry around in our cell phones and laptops and myriad other devices. And you might remember 10 or maybe 15 years ago, you would occasionally read a news story about someone's cell phone catching fire. You remember that a little bit? You don't read those anymore. Even though now, I think the majority of people living on the planet today, the majority of adults, carry a cell phone around in their pocket. And that is because we have gotten so much better at making these things. Year after year after year, improvements. So what those declining prices have meant is that it's become affordable for the first time to put not just a small one of these in a $600 cell phone or even in a car, but to pack these together lots and lots and lots in these big grid scale batteries that can support the whole electrical grid. And so deployment is taking off exponentially. This is a graph of deployment in the US, but it's the exact same story globally, almost every country in the world. There is a revolution happening right now that most of us aren't aware of in how the electrical system operates. And you can see,
You broke it.
I broke it. There we go. You can see that in the US, states like Texas and California and Florida are ahead of the curve. In New York, we're just getting started. As the saying goes, the future is here, it is just not evenly distributed. Right?
I advanced it.
This is
More
this
batteries.
is a Duracell. Maybe I should have changed it.
I have ones if you need them.
Well, I think
Okay.
Thomas can advance for me if I need it. So they've gotten cheap, they've gotten affordable to deploy at grid scale, but I still haven't answered the question, why? Why do grid operators want to deploy these things so much? Two basic reasons. The first is economics. They make the grid operate more efficiently and therefore at lower cost. And the second is resilience and reliability. They help to keep the lights on. So I'm going to talk almost exclusively about economics, not resilience. And there are lots of ways, in fact, that batteries help the grid operate more efficiently. I'm going to talk just about two of them. The first, let's see if this works, yes, is by providing, did you do that or did I?
I did.
What?
Yes, I did. Maybe I should put the clicker down. I can change the battery.
I'll use the clicker then you'll know when. And I'll have the illusion of power. So the first is by providing access to cheaper power. And this is something that these batteries do wherever they're deployed, anywhere in the country or in the world. But it is actually especially important and especially valuable where we live, in the Hudson Valley. There we go. Oh, no, that one. There we go. Thanks. And to understand why, you have to know that New York State has functionally not one, but two almost separate electrical grids. Not really separate, but kind of separate. In upstate and western New York, the light blue on here, the sources of generation are almost exclusively, are overwhelmingly clean. See the graph there, the green, sources of power, and also very inexpensive sources of generation. So think, I'm going to just try this. Yeah, I got it. So think hydropower in Niagara Falls, and also imported from Quebec. Think a small but rapidly growing amount of wind power, and not shown here, but a smaller but even more rapidly growing amount of solar power. and think nuclear power. The black lines, these things, the black lines on this map represent high voltage transmission lines. Those are the big power lines that you see on 150-foot tall metal lattice towers. Those are bulk transmission of power across the state. So you can think of them as the interstate highway system for electricity. But this yellow area here, the yellow area with the yellow crosshatch, is called the Central East constraint. And this is an area where we do not have enough of these. This picture diagram and the dates are from 2021, and it's a little bit better now than it was then, but the central constraint is still there. And so what this means is that during the day, at times of high demand for electricity in our part of the state, down in the Hudson Valley and into the city in Long Island, the lines that are there, they're like two-lane highways instead of interstates. They're full. We cannot bring in as much of that cheap and, as it happens, clean power that is available upstate as we would like. So what do we do to meet our demand? What we do is fire up gas and oil-fired power plants in the Hudson Valley. This is the Danskammer plant near Newburgh. And these things are, on the one hand, they pollute our air. And because the Hudson Valley is shaped like a bowl, it's green and beautiful, and you would not think of it. We have some of the higher asthma rates in the country, and these power plants are a major contributor to that. But they are also just very, very expensive to operate compared to the cleaner power and the cheaper power that is available upstate, but that we can't get to us, right? So you can see that. This is a snapshot I took a little while ago from the real-time dashboard run by the New York ISO. This is the system operator that runs the wholesale power market where utilities, like Central Hudson, go to buy power for us, and which then the cost of which gets passed through to us utility customers, right? So it's divided into zones. We are, oops, I'm gonna try, back. There, we are in zone G. And what you can see, and the price of power varies all the time, and it varies in the different zones all the time. But you can see at the time I took this, right? The price of power in the Hudson Valley was $26 per megawatt hour. The price of power upstate, just a little bit away, was $12, $14 per megawatt hour. We're paying more than twice as much. That cheap power is there, but we can't get it to ourselves, because that lack of transmission on the Central East constraint blocks it, right? So we are having to pay to fire up those expensive and polluting oil and gas-fired power plants in the Hudson Valley and then also down into the city. And so I just have to remember to point this in the right direction, and then it actually works. I just have been pointing to the screen. Here's how batteries can help. Overnight, demand for electricity is really low. People are sleeping, most businesses and factories are closed, and so those high voltage transmission lines that are congested, clogged during the day, they have plenty of spare capacity at night because no one is using the electricity. So, there we go. Still, there we go. We can install, here's what we can do. We can install grid-scale batteries on those transmission lines, right alongside them, up and down the Hudson Valley, all the way into Long Island. And then, overnight, when demand for power is low and those transmission lines have capacity, we can use those batteries to suck up that cheap and clean hydropower and wind power and nuclear and so on from upstate. And then, during the day, when those transmission lines are now congested again, we can discharge those batteries into our local distribution networks, going to our homes and businesses. And so we get power we get both cleaner air and cheaper power, right? You can think of it as we have pre-transmitted the power overnight, and that it is there on this side of the wall, as it were, when we need it. So this is valuable anytime, right? But when it really shines is in really extreme conditions when there's very high demand for electricity. So you may remember that on June 24th of this last summer, temperatures around the state hit 100 degrees, and everyone was cranking up their ACs, and so demand for power surged. So by 10:30 in the morning, the price of power in the Hudson Valley was $120 per megawatt hour. By 3:40 in the afternoon, it was $1,255 per megawatt hour. And by 6 p.m., when everyone was coming home from work and turning on their ACs and turning on their TVs or their microwave ovens or whatever else, the grid, according to the system operator, was on the verge, just on the edge, of widespread power outages in which we could not supply enough power to meet demand. So the grid operator, NYSO, had to pay facilities like hospitals to turn on their backup diesel generators to feed power back into the grid to meet demand. And we did avoid widespread outages, but the price of power in the Hudson Valley spiked to $2,500 per megawatt hour. Down in Long Island, $7,300 per megawatt hour. That shows up, it's not broken out like that, but that shows up in our electric bills and part of our bills called the supply charges. And that means real hardship for a lot of families. There are a lot of families in the Hudson Valley who are already behind on their electric bills. And this is one day costing them more than weeks and weeks and weeks, right? So New York's power market is set up, the way it's structured, it tries to avoid price spikes like that. Those are like when something goes wrong, you get a price spike like that. Texas's power market is different. It is structured to allow price spikes. That is part of the market design. And until a couple of years ago, they were very common. So what you're seeing here, I don't know if you can read, but this is the price of electricity on different days in August 1st of 2023. And so you can see in August of 2023, there are all these spikes up to $5,000 or $4,000 or $3,000 or $2,000, fairly common in Texas. And they got savings other places that compensate for it. But a year later, you can see just a few of those price spikes. And in 2025, basically none. How did that happen? How did they tame those price spikes? They did it by deploying boatloads of batteries really, really quickly in the case of Texas. So that when those batteries are sitting around and they are soaking up power when power is cheap and when there is not high demand, and then when demand starts to rise and the price starts to spike, they release that power into the grid. And that cuts off the spike because there are lots of them competing with each other, underbidding each other, underbidding other generators. That cuts off those spikes before the spikes happen. So that's one way that batteries save us money. There is another way. They can help to avoid the cost of upgrading the electrical grid. So start here for a second. So your electric bill, two parts. One part is supply. That's what you pay to the generators who sell power to the grid. That's what we were just talking about. The other part is called delivery charges. That is the cost of paying to build and then maintain the transmission lines and substations and transformers and switchgear and distribution lines and so on, all the infrastructure that is necessary to supply power, to provide power to our doors, right? And for about the last 20 years, until about a year or 2 years ago, demand for electricity in New York and across the US was mostly flat, mostly because of efficiency gains. And so our only cost here was just maintaining existing infrastructure. About 2 years ago, that started to change. Demand for electricity is growing, and as I'll explain in a moment, what really matters is demand at the sort of peak hours of the year. So this graph is showing peak during the winter time, winter peaks. It is now growing rapidly and is expected for a variety of reasons, some of them really good, to continue growing for the next couple of decades, right? So winter peaks in 2040 will be somewhere around 2 times what they are now in New York State. By 2050, sometime around 2.5 times. What that means, that can have disastrous consequences, or really big consequences for our electric bills. In order to avoid blackouts, utilities have to build grid infrastructure. They have to size it for the peak hours, not just of a year, think like June 24th at 6 p.m., but of a decade. If they don't build it with enough for that highest, peakiest peak, right, then you'll have a blackout at a very dangerous time. And people will die in their homes from hot weather or cold weather if you don't do that. So they have to build to meet that very peak demand, even though it's just a few hours of a year or a decade. What that means is everything you see on this diagram, this transformers and transmission lines and substations, all of that, if we just sort of continue in the business as usual way, in order to meet growing peak, all of that has to be built out, doubled 2.5 times in coming decades. That would be enormously, enormously expensive, right? And we are already starting to see it, right? You probably have seen it yourself. Electric bills are going up. One reason is the rising cost of gas, but studies are really clear that the predominant driver of recent electric bill increases is needing to build new grid capacity to meet those growing peaks. And that is expected to continue for decades to come. Batteries give us a way out, or a partial way out, I should say. So look at this diagram again, and remember what we were talking about a moment ago, which is we put batteries along the transmission lines at the substations up and down the Hudson Valley in our case, right? Then on a peak day, we have our existing infrastructure upstream from the power plants. We're using that at full force, but then we also have all that power that's already pre-transmitted to those batteries, and we can still give that over the last mile to our homes and businesses. So we probably have to upgrade that last mile to meet the to hold that extra power. But we don't have to upgrade everything that is upstream. And that is a huge saving over coming decades. So, and doing this as a bonus helps avoid power outages. And that's exactly what we saw in Texas, where in 1 year, from 2024 to 2025, according to their nonprofit grid operator, the risk of outages went from 12% down to 1%, right? Because of the batteries that they deployed. That's what they attributed it to. So here's the thing. What I've just been describing to you is not something out of my brain. This is NYSERDA's plan. They put together a roadmap for how we can deploy batteries in New York State to keep costs down even as the grid is growing. But here's the thing. Whether this happens or not is not up to NYSERDA. It's not up to NYSO or any state agency. In order for these batteries to play this role that I have been describing, they can't be located, concentrated in just a few places. They need to be widely distributed, all over the place. And so that means that local decision makers in town boards and city councils all up and down the state will either enable this strategy or they will block it. So it is up to you guys and the decision makers, if you are a decision maker, or the decision makers who represent you, to decide whether the benefits I've talked about, how to weigh those against the kinds of legitimate, reasonable concerns that Chief Murray will talk about in just a moment. That's it.
So Dan Murray recently retired from New York City Fire Department as the Chief in Charge of HazMat Operations. Chief Murray was responsible for operations, training, logistics, and finance of all FDNY HazMat response units. His training includes response to radiological nuclear WMD and CTOS Nevada, tanker and rail response, live agent, and bomb school at New Mexico Tech. He completed the West Point Counterterrorism Leadership Program. He is a graduate of the Fire Officers Management Institute at Columbia University and the U.S. Naval Postgraduate School's Radiation Emergency Preparedness Program and has a BA in Political Science. He is currently a senior consultant at Energy Safety Response Group, where he is a subject matter expert and trains fire departments throughout North America in battery energy storage systems. Dan recently lectured in Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa, training regional fire departments on lithium-ion battery response, and was a speaker at the NFPA 2025 conference in Las Vegas. We're so excited to have an distinguished person with so much background. Please take it away.
Thank you. I'll make that shorter.
Good evening, everybody. So, a lot of stuff the professor went into, I'm going to repeat it, but it's going to be for a different reason, just to explain it differently from the fire safety, which of course is always a concern. That's usually one of the main obstacles when we're trying to have these battery systems installed. People have concerns about what happens if something goes wrong. And that's great, and I think people should always be concerned about that, and it is a new technology. There is some misinformation and misunderstanding out there, so I'd like to get into what we did in the New York City Fire Department. I took over HazMat operations I've been retired about a year, so it's about 6 years ago they put me in charge of HazMat, and I did not expect that I would be doing a deep dive into lithium-ion batteries. Partly because the BESS systems had already been coming online, and HazMat operations worked hand in hand with the fire prevention units to come up with our codes and standards within New York City. New York City has always had the toughest fire codes in the United States, and we've been a model for everything from high rises to tunnels and anything you can think of. New York City has very strict standards, and that's for a good reason, because it's such a densely populated area. There's really no room for error. Currently, we have about 30 BESS systems operating in New York City, and there's a lot more being installed and planned and going through the whole process. As you can imagine, in New York, we don't have a lot of room. So these things are squeezed into residential, commercial areas. There's schools and churches and everything else, and we have not had an incident thus far. And these are some older systems, because they've been in operation going back to 2018. So we helped develop not just the codes, but also the response procedures for the fire department. What do we do if something goes wrong? And in New York City, we had a lot of lithium-ion battery issues, not with BESS, but anybody who watches the news, the e-bikes, the scooters, the cheaply made, abused, altered batteries that people were using, delivery workers were using, bouncing off sidewalks, and the salt from the road, and dropping the batteries down the staircase, and then combining batteries together with electrical tape and wires. We were having a lot of fires, so people kept seeing the headlines, lithium-ion battery fire burns a building down. That's not this. It's also not your EV, right? Because when you talk to name brand companies, like we mentioned the cell phones. Samsung had cell phones that were going on fire. Not a good look for Samsung. The Chevy Volts were going on fire. Not a good look for Chevy. But these major manufacturers that build these, they have a reputation of attack. So these are very regulated, very well-made systems today. Just to get into the basics of what one of these BESS systems is, it comes in, you're going to see, it looks like a container basically. That's your BESS unit. So when we talk about how many megawatt hours of power, it depends on how many cabinets are installed on a site. But to start at the smallest part is cells. The battery cell is really what makes this system work. And it's basically electrochemical storage. They're about a little bit larger than a AA battery. They come in all different shapes and sizes, but this is probably the most common one, the 9640. I mean, not whatever size cell that was. It's like a little bigger than a battery, than a AA battery. When you combine cells together, they go into modules. And then you put the modules together and you're gonna get these. These are modules, and then you get a rack. And then you put all these racks together into one container-sized unit, and that's your BESS system. Within that system, there's a battery management system that monitors the health and the temperature and the voltage and the currents going into every single one of those cells. So if anything were to go wrong or be an anomaly, it's remotely monitored and it can be shut down automatically or remotely. And that's why we don't have very many incidents. And I'm gonna get into more of that. That's what the whole container looks like. They used to be made where the container was more of like a building, and the service people would walk inside to service the batteries. The industry stopped making those altogether because there were problems with that. We don't want people going inside. So now it's all outside doors, so any service that has to be done, they open those outside doors and service it. The codes and standards. So the 2025 International Fire Code covers, and a lot of these codes and standards, they kind of build off of each other, between the IFC, the National Fire Protection Association, which, if you're familiar with that, anything, sprinkler systems, building codes, anything that basically has to do with fire safety, NFPA has a say in that. And those standards are set by a combination of industry and fire service people. So, like the NFPA 855 is the standard for the installation of stationary energy storage systems. So myself and some of my other chiefs would sit in on those meetings where they would come up with the recommendations for the industry on how to build these systems. You also have Underwriters Laboratory. So anything you buy electronic, or really any appliance you own, you want to look for that Underwriters Laboratory stamp on it. And that means it's been tested very thoroughly by UL. UL sets the 9540 standard, which is for any of these BESS systems. And then there's what's called the UL 9540A standard, which is the test method for these systems. That's something our company actually does. We have a laboratory where we force the individual cells I was talking about, we force them into thermal runaway just to see how it reacts, how much gas it produces, what kind of gases it produces. And then we test it on the modular level, where we try to get the module to go onto fire, which is very difficult to do with these modern systems. And we build up to where we try to get the entire BESS system to burn. And that's for many reasons. It's to see how all those safety systems operate in there, and then to see what happens when you actually get it to burn. What's the heat flux coming off of this system? And that's how we determine, when you see these systems laid out and spacing between systems, they're spaced in such a way that if one were to go on fire, it won't spread to the next one. And I'm going to get more into some of this stuff as we go. New York State Fire Code. So there were 3 fires in New York State. One was in Nassau County, another one was in Warwick, and another one was way up in Chemung. After that, the governor's office decided they wanted to put together an interagency fire safety working group to come up with a state fire law that would give New York State the safest laws regarding these systems in the country. And they did that, and we have that now. Some of the things in the new 2025 code, which essentially is now mandatory as of January 1st of this year. Fire notifications, how do we notify the fire department when something happens? That's spelled out. The constant monitoring of the battery management system. So it's remotely monitored by a remote operations center, and often it's also monitored by the manufacturer themselves. So if they install like a Tesla system, the company that installed it monitors, and also Tesla monitors. So it's always being looked at. Firefighter reach back. This is a big thing that was pushed by the fire service because if you're in some small town with a volunteer fire department and they show up to one of these, are they going to know what they're supposed to do? And the answer is yes, because one of the other things is annual firefighter training. So before this system's put it online, our company, this is what I actually enjoy doing the most, we give them a full day of training. We do a whole classroom thing where we get into how the batteries work, and then we go out to the site with the engineers and we show them the whole system. And without exception, when we're done with the training, the firefighters and the chiefs feel very confident that they can handle anything that happens. And I'll give you the quick version of what we train the fire department to do. There's more to it than this. Basically, they show up, they look, we build out a emergency response plan, which is also part of the of NFPA 855 and the New York State Code, and it's like a whole set of instructions on what they should do, and that's developed with that fire chief. But also, there's a number they can call, and New York State law requires that within 15 minutes, and it's actually, in real life, it's pretty much instantaneous, they're gonna get somebody on the phone that's gonna have eyes on that battery management system with the fire alarm panels and explain what's going on, right? Because a lot of times when an alarm does go off, the fire department typically is gonna pull up and there's nothing going on. Maybe there was a problem with the voltage in one cell and they shut it down remotely, whatever the case is, there's nothing going on, so the guy can tell them what's going on. The next part, which is great, is, and some people question this, but within 4 hours, a subject matter expert has to be on scene standing next to that incident commander. And the 4 hours is, it's gonna be in less than 4 hours, that's the maximum, and that's because this is a big state. But in downstate here, where there's a lot of experts around, that should be pretty quickly. And we'll be standing next to that fire chief to make sure things are handled properly. And just an anecdotal, there was a fire recently in Warwick. They had this very substandard battery system put in. It was kind of old. We believe there was some water intrusion into the system, and it went on fire. And I went up and interviewed the Warwick chief and the Orange County HazMat chief, who was a friend of mine, just to go over how did the response go. And Warwick's a small town, small volunteer fire department, a volunteer HazMat team. They showed up, the thing was burning, basically looked like a dumpster fire. I saw the videos. The chief, told his firefighters and the engine company remain in the firehouse because it was raining. No need for the fire engine to even come out, stand by. They had the HazMat team come in, set up air monitoring around the site. They monitored the air, nothing went above any EPA limits. That came in at like 10:30 at night. By 3 in the morning, they reduced the fire department. Subject matter experts had arrived, drones were up, all that stuff. So this works. The fire alarm central station, that's the same thing as like if an alarm, I'm sure this building probably has a fire alarm system, right? If there's a smoke detector, it's going to send an alarm to a central station, which is going to alert the fire department that there's a problem. The same basic system, because these systems will have smoke, heat, and gas detection built in. The peer review, which is very important. I'm going to get into some of this in the next slide. So the ERP I mentioned, emergency response plan, it's built specifically for that site. This is something our company, ESRG, does. We design the ERP. We also run it by the chief to make sure if he has any comments or suggestions or wants changes done to it. It gets into everything from where their staging area can be, where their access is, where their water supply is. It has to be updated annually if necessary. It includes that familiarization that I talked about, where the firefighters are brought into the facility to walk through. And If they need more training or equipment, we make sure that that happens. Typically, the equipment they need, they already have. They generally already have it. It's common firefighting equipment. The peer review is another part of the New York State Code, which is very important. And what it requires is if a company comes in to install a battery energy storage system, there's 3 companies right now in New York State that are recognized as peer review companies. One of them is the one I work for, ESRG. What we'll do is we look at everything that this company did, the way it was set up, and is paid for by the developer, not for the municipality. We make sure that the fire alarms, if they say the fire alarm system is installed, we say, well, show us how it works, demonstrate it. The locations that they're set up. So when they go to the zoning board and the zoning board says it's supposed to be here, we make sure it's done properly, that it was done the way that the zoning board recommended. When it says battery listings, that it, it's UL tested, 9548 tested, and that the separation distances are based on those tests. The commissioning plans and decommissioning plans. So as they're installing these systems, they have to be installed in the proper fashion. We make sure that's done according to NFPA. Decommissioning is, now most of the ones that I've been involved in, there is a decommissioning plan built in with a bond that goes in. So even if the company that installed it goes out of business, the money's there to take this down if there were a problem or if it reaches end of life. And that's kind of what I covered most of this. The functionality, like we said, if they say that there's a remote shut-off, we say, show us how it works. Shut it off remotely. There's an e-stop on site that shuts down the container. We make them hit the button and shut it off. We make sure all these things work. Any repairs and replacements have to go through the authority having jurisdiction, which would be, I would imagine, the town of New Paltz in this location. The annual fire alarm testing. That's like most buildings. They have an annual fire alarm system, same with these systems. Has to be monitored by, we're going to be on top of making sure it's done properly. The response protocols for the subject matter expert. So if we're saying that there's going to be a subject matter expert on scene in 4 hours, that has to be proven that it can be done. So there has to be subject matter experts stationed throughout the state able to meet those requirements. Signage was a big one. So a lot of these, if the firefighters arrive, there has to be the proper signage explaining what's there with a phone number. Typically there's also a lockbox with that ERP that I explained in there, explaining in case there's a fire department that would normally respond, shows up, they have the ERP available.
Okay, perfect. I was about to say you have 10 minutes left, but you're
Oh.
done. All right, let me go get my.
Okay.
Okay. We're gonna
I can go on.
Do you want to say anything else?
So just to comment on what the professor was saying, I was down in Texas several times now training their fire departments, and they have these BESS systems where the batteries are almost as far as the eye can see in these very rural districts. And I was training one of the fire departments, and we were in a trailer next to the BESS, where the BESS systems were, and 8 members of the fire department showed up. It took me 3 airplanes to get to this really backwards part of Texas. And I said, is the rest of your fire department coming? And he said, oh, this is our entire fire department. There's 8 people.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to kick it to Joe just to talk a little bit more about New Paltz specifically, since that's where we are.
Thank you. So my name is Joe Londa, a resident of the town of New Paltz. I'm a member of the Climate Smart Communities Task Force. I'm a retired system engineer, been involved in high-end technology and particularly how do you make very reliable systems. So because of that background, I was asked back in 2022 by the supervisor, Neil Betts, to lead a task force on creating local law. So I led that initiative. We created a draft law, brought it to the, discusses, here are the issues, here are some of the facts, here are the things we need to know about batteries in our community. So it is, again, an educational document, and it poses questions like, well, you need to consider zoning, you need to consider lot size, you need to consider noise abatement and vegetation cutback. These are all the things that would go into a robust system. So these two assets, these two resources are available for anyone to look at, whether you're a New Paltz town member or another town. They're assets that you can take advantage of. And I know that we've had people looking at them. I'm here tonight if you have any questions regarding them. You can stay afterwards and answer any questions that if you've looked at them already. And so
And we just wanted to offer something before we open up to the panel. Say thank you so much for joining. Check out the resources on our table. There's some nice BESS fact sheets. There's a fact sheet we put together. And there's some stickers you can grab. And yeah, put down your information if you want us to follow up, especially if you didn't register in advance. We need your email to be able to send you the recording and the slide deck. One more. And also wanted to thank our sponsors. This was sponsored by the New Paltz Climate Action Coalition, the New Paltz Climate Smart Task Force, the Sierra Club Mid-Hudson Group, and Citizens Climate Lobby Mid-Hudson. So all of these orgs put things together, help with the food, help with the door prizes, and made this event possible. Oh, and the Town of New Paltz Recreation Center, thank you so much for hosting us in this space. Yeah. Okay, if our panelists want to come up here, and Jennifer's going to start with just introducing herself and a little bit about NYSERDA's siting team.
Should be slides on there somewhere. Thank you. Hi, it's not going to be another full presentation. Don't worry, we're going to get to the questions. I don't want to take a ton of time, but my name is Jen Minier. I'm with NYSERDA. It's the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, if you're not familiar, State Energy Office for short. We have our hands in everything from like building energy efficiency to transportation stuff, all the way up through large-scale renewables and things like energy storage like we're here talking about tonight. My team in particular, though, the Clean Energy Siting team, our job is to work with local governments across the state and help those local governments prepare for all the new stuff that's coming into your communities. Energy storage being one of them, but we also have a lot of resources and offer technical assistance on solar and wind. We can help you update your comprehensive plan if that hasn't been done in a while to incorporate clean energy into it as you see fit. So we do things like, coming out here tonight to talk to folks, but we also have our written guidebooks available on our webpage for all of the aforementioned technologies, including battery energy storage. We'll do educational sessions. I could get up here and also talk for 2 hours straight about energy storage. Lucky you, that's not going to happen tonight. You can always call us, email us. We'll do one-on-one technical assistance. Basically, we're here sort of a free technical consultants for communities across the state to try to help you answer your questions and be prepared as best you can, right? We also have some pre-recorded trainings on our website. It's very easy to remember, just nyserda.ny.gov/site. And our email address is up there too, also very easy to remember, cleanenergyhelp@nyserda.ny.gov. And if you just want to flip to the next slide and last slide, I just want to give you a brief overview here of what's actually in our energy storage guidebook for local governments. It says for local governments, but it's also a great educational resource for anyone, even if you're not a local government official and you want to learn about this stuff. We just updated it, so a lot of this stuff is new and it's great. We have some fact sheets up there. There's links to the new fire code that Chief Murray was talking about, which is great. It's the best one in the country as far as I know. The FAQ document is brand new. I think that might be the most useful thing for a lot of the folks in this room. Hopefully it answers all of your energy storage related questions. If it doesn't, let us know because we'll need to update it and put more FAQs in there. We got a model permit, all of the deliverables that came out of that interagency fire safety working group that you heard about earlier are in there. And then peer review resources that sort of explain how that whole third party peer review thing works. So yeah, we have resources, we're here to help. Reach out if you need it, and now we'll do questions.
Great. You can keep the
Can
mic.
I just give one bit of testimony to NYSERDA? So when the town of Poughkeepsie wanted to put in place a zoning law They started from NYSERDA's model zoning law, but then they had changes they wanted to make for questions, and folks from NYSERDA, from Jen's team, were in the room, either physically or virtually, through all those meetings, just like giving advice and guidance, and it was extremely helpful so like, it's not something like the town government has to do on its own. They were there as a resource.
All of our advice is take it or leave it. We're not telling anyone what to